firearms are prohibited at protests. Those statements were later clarified, but they're erroneous and not helpful. The First and Second Amendment are not suspended during periods of unrest or during protests. When officials speak imprecisely or rashly about constitutional limits, especially in volatile moments, they risk inflaming the situation rather than stabilizing it. Law enforcement officers perform difficult and dangerous work, and the vast majority do so honorably. But when a shooting occurs, the proper response is not to dismiss concerns or rush to judgment. Traditionally, the officers are removed from the line, even in very justified shootings, even in shootings when they've been shot at multiple times, wounded. The officers typically removed in this investigation because we think lethal force is such a thing that should be controlled and restricted that we always investigate it. That's what needed to happen here and should happen. The process protects both the public and the law enforcement officers, but we must avoid on all sides is just resorting to inflammatory rhetoric, declaring nothing to see here, or rushing to label a U.S. citizen a domestic terrorist before the evidence is established undermines trust and escalates already volatile situations. Both parties have weaponized the term domestic terrorist to target those with opposing views, and it needs to end. Many Americans have seen the videos. Many see an individual retreating. Many see someone attempting to assist a woman on the ground before being seized from behind. Reasonable people may disagree about those videos, but the truth must be determined by evidence, not narrative. I support immigration and customs enforcement. I believe dangerous criminals should be removed from our communities. But in order for ICE to be successful, they must restore public trust. We must acknowledge when federal agents are placed in chaotic crowd control situations that the risk of tragedy increases. At the same time, state and local decisions that limit cooperation affect how and where federal enforcement is carried out. Escalatory statements from any level of government only make it worse. Reports that cooperation in Minnesota is improving and that agents will return to their normal assignments and be repositioned outside of Minnesota are encouraging. Restoring trust, however, requires more than assurances. It requires independent review, clear standards for the use of force, and honest accountability. A government that values liberty must be willing to examine its own actions. That is how we protect civil liberties. That's how we protect law enforcement, and that's how we protect against future loss of life. Senator Peters.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for convening today's hearing. In communities all across the country, Americans have seen on video with their own eyes as law enforcement officers from the Department of Homeland Security have tackled and beaten U.S. citizens in the streets, as they've broken windows and yanked U.S. citizens from their cars, as they've been pepper sprayed in the face at point blank, and as they have shot and killed 2 U.S. citizens, Renee Good and Alex Preedy, who were exercising their First Amendment rights. In Mr. Preedy's case, his Second Amendment rights. These actions have been carried out by masked federal officers without appropriate identification and near areas like schools and houses of worship, where innocent children are often present and placed in harm's way. While all Americans agree that we should remove violent criminals who pose a threat to public safety as part of immigration enforcement, we all agree at that. But most Americans also overwhelmingly agree that the administration's violent and heavy-handed tactics are an abuse of power, and they must be reined in. Today's hearing comes at a critical time, as Congress has a chance to put needed reforms in place to hold DHS law officials and enforcement officers who supervise them accountable. And I'm grateful that today the committee and the American people will have a chance to hear not only from state officials from the state of Minnesota, but most importantly from key agency officials within the DHS who oversee the officers carrying out the actions that we have all seen on the ground in communities like Minneapolis. I look forward to hearing testimony from these DHS officials, but at the end of the day, they all answer to Secretary Noem. She must also fulfill her responsibility to testify before this committee, and more importantly, the American people, for the lawless and unconstitutional behavior that some DHS officers have carried out under her leadership. Today, we're going to hear a lot of explanations and justifications from federal officials, and I'm sure we'll hear accusations about communities like Minneapolis and what the Trump administration thinks their obligations are when it comes to immigration enforcement. But let's be clear, immigration enforcement is solely the responsibility of the federal government. We'll hear today from state officials in Minnesota who will shine a light on how they cooperate with ICE, despite the administration's rhetoric to the contrary. Instead of working cooperatively with the state and local enforcement on these operations, through their chaotic and dangerous engagements, the Trump administration has undermined all trust between communities and federal law enforcement. In doing so, they have made it harder for local police to protect public safety and address crime in their communities. On top of that, the DHS has also broken trust with the American people to the point where we can no longer believe the words and information the department is putting out. For example, in the aftermath of the horrific shooting deaths of Renee Good and Alex Preddy at the hands of DHS officers, Secretary Noem and other officials rushed to smear two citizens exercising their First Amendment rights as violent threats and as domestic terrorists. DHS and White House officials used these words, spun a narrative that falsely painted the victims as violent agitators, and tried to manipulate the truth about what actually happened on the ground. And they did this despite the fact that there were multiple videos that have allowed all of us to see with our own eyes, what actually happened. That Americans who posed no threat were shot and killed in our streets by representatives of the federal government. However, despite the efforts of the Trump administration to spin lies, like most Americans, I believe the truth still matters. I believe that every federal law enforcement officer has a responsibility to conduct their work in a professional manner and in accordance with the law. And I believe that when they don't, whether it is an individual officer or a high-ranking official from the Department of Homeland Security, they must be held accountable for their actions. Today's hearing is about holding DHS accountable for the terror that they have unleashed in our communities through these violent, excessive, and unprofessional tactics. And as I said before, I expect to hear more excuses than admissions of error from the DHS officials. So with that in mind, I want to remind everyone exactly what we're talking about today. Got a brief video. If you put the brief video up, this is what we're talking about today.
Yeah, why didn't you put that information down? Because we're just
Case.
oh, good.
And you're considered domestic terrorist.
We're videotaping you?
Mr. Chairman, I also ask you unanimous consent to submit letters I have received from stakeholders in the communities,
My home, my story. This is where I'm meant to be. A haven of vitality and energy and boundless joy.
This isn't just a place to rest. This is where I feel whole, where I don't just exist. I thrive. This is my home.
Falcon View Mohali by JLPL. Your home, where luxury resides.
Member gets to address the upper chamber. I also want to clearly has no problem talking about Minneapolis to any member of the media who will listen. So it makes you wonder if he's too afraid to repeat those same lies under oath. I guess time will tell. As the representative of Minnesota's 6th Congressional District, I have witnessed firsthand the consequences that come when our Democrat state leaders prioritize criminal illegal aliens over law-abiding Minnesotans. The unrest that we all watched unfold in Minneapolis over recent weeks was unnerving. It was heartbreaking. And any loss of life is tragic. But make no mistake, it was all a direct result of radical sanctuary state and city policies in Minnesota. By preventing local law enforcement from working together with federal law enforcement, they have turned Minnesota into a safe haven for criminal illegal aliens. We're talking about murderers, rapists, gang members, and child predators. Now, before you hear dizzying spin from one of the other witnesses here today, let's take a closer look at how we got here. In 2021, with Attorney General Keith Ellison as the chief law enforcement officer in our state, the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office issued a directive which prohibited the county's cooperation with immigration and customs enforcement. 4 years later, Ellison issued 2 legal opinions arguing that Minnesota state and local law enforcement agencies from holding someone based on an immigration detainer if the person would otherwise be released from custody. What happened as a result? Criminal illegal aliens were released back onto our streets, putting innocent Minnesotans' lives at risk. Take the case of Victoria Aline Harwell, for example, a Minnesota mom who was allegedly killed by an illegal alien in a drunk driving car crash. Hennepin County ignored detainer requests and let this criminal walk not once, but twice, citing Attorney General Ellison's opinion. Flash forward to December 2025, when the Trump administration launched Operation Metro Surge in Minneapolis, fulfilling the border security mandate they were given by 77 million Americans and following the uncovering of rampant Somali fraud throughout our state. As of last week, 4,000 illegal aliens have been arrested since Operation Metro Surge began. That includes the worst of the worst off our streets. But in response, Tim Walz and Keith Ellison sued the Department of Homeland Security for simply deploying federal law enforcement to enforce federal law. That lawsuit was ultimately rejected by a Biden-appointed federal judge, and now Trump border czar Tom Homan has been working with Minnesota officials to scale back Operation Metro Surge on the condition that local law enforcement be allowed to cooperate with federal law enforcement. Something, by the way, that occurred under the President Obama's administration. It's important to note that it didn't have to be this way. The chaos in Minneapolis was entirely preventable had the local law enforcement been allowed to work with federal law enforcement from the beginning. We see that in states like Texas, Florida, Utah. We also see that in 8 Minnesota counties, including Sherburne County, which is in my district. Sherburne and these 7 counties have proactively partnered with federal law enforcement to prevent criminal illegal aliens from roaming free, despite threats of ridiculous lawsuits by the ACLU arising from Attorney General Ellison's dangerous guidance. It's really that simple. By allowing local law enforcement to notify federal law enforcement when they arrest illegal aliens and detain them until a federal officer can come and get them, we limit the Fed's footprint and keep dangerous criminals off our streets. It's a win-win for all parties involved. But Tim Walz, Keith Ellison, and Jacob Fry are so beholden to their radical sanctuary state and city agenda that they've lost all common sense. And now here we are today with innocent lives lost and chaos in our streets. It's horrible, but entirely preventable. And it makes you wonder, why are Minnesota Democrats so keen on protecting criminal illegal aliens? Is it so that they can secure votes come election season? Tim Walz, after all, refuses to hand over Minnesota's voter rolls to the Department of Justice. And Keith Ellison has a history of cutting deals with Somali fraudsters for personal, political, and financial gain. These are all very important questions, and I hope we can get some clarification on all of them. Minnesotans deserve answers and accountability. Thank you for allowing me to testify on behalf of all the hardworking, law-abiding, hearing that justice be served. I yield back.
Congressman Emmer, thank you for your statement and for your participation today. It's the practice of this committee to swear in witnesses. Will each of the remaining witnesses rise and raise your right hand? Do you swear that the testimony you will give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? You may be seated. Our first witness will be Harry Niska, who represents District 31A in the Minnesota House of Representatives and serves as the Republican floor leader. Representative Niska, you are recognized for your opening statement.
Chairman Paul, Ranking Member Peters, and members of this committee. My name is Harry Niska. I serve in the Minnesota House of Representatives. Thank you for the opportunity to present a perspective from Minnesota's immigration enforcement crisis. I want to start by expressing my appreciation for the recent recalibration of federal enforcement under Tom Homan. His commitment to rebuilding accountability and trust is essential, and we're already seeing a more focused and disciplined federal effort on the ground. But federal action only tells part of the story. Minnesota had been proud of our reputation for clean and good government, but recently we've become a cautionary tale of chaos, corruption, and fraud. And this decline is the result of specific policy choices made by Minnesota Democrats, especially related to immigration policy. First, they rolled out a welcome mat of benefits that erase the distinction between legal and illegal presence. In 2023, specifically, under all Democrat control, Minnesota passed driver's licenses for all, explicitly including those without legal status, and even refused to include common sense measures like a label saying not eligible for voting. Minnesota created the North Star Promise, which provides free college tuition, including to illegal immigrants, and Minnesota extended taxpayer-funded health care and paid leave benefits to those here illegally. But beyond incentives, we face a graver issue in Minnesota: active nullification of federal law. Our Attorney General Keith Ellison issued an opinion blocking the use of 287G agreements, the gold standard for federal, state law enforcement cooperation. And in another opinion, he provided legal cover for sheriffs who want to ignore ICE detainers. The results are stark. In some counties, ICE detainers are complied with, but in Hennepin County, our largest jurisdiction featuring Minneapolis, the sheriff's office complied with only 8% of ICE detainer requests over a 2-year period. This obstruction has a cost. When jails refuse to honor detainers, they don't stop enforcement, they displace it. Arresting a suspect in the secure environment of a jail is safe and efficient. Forcing that arrest happen in a home or a workplace, or what we saw just this week in the lobby of the Hennepin County Courthouse, drastically increases the risk to officers and the public. When Minnesota local law enforcement officials, the Hennepin County attorney, thinks it's better to release someone caught with 50 pounds of meth in January and release them out into the community, and ICE has to arrest them in the lobby of the Hennepin County Courthouse, which is what happened yesterday. That is what causes the chaos that we've seen in Minneapolis. And the Minneapolis Police Department has refused to assist even in crowd control during these types of chaotic situations. That's what resulted in the 2 tragic deaths that we heard about earlier today. And we will never know, sadly, how those 2 situations had turned out if Minneapolis police had been permitted by their political leaders like Governor Walz, Attorney General Ellison, and Mayor Frey to simply keep the peace rather than forcing federal law enforcement officials into a chaotic situation. The rule of law must include enforcing federal immigration law. It must be done within the bounds of the law. But simply withdrawing federal enforcement at a heckler's veto because of those who are opposed to enforcing the law would only validate nullification and encourage further lawlessness. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Keith Ellison is the Attorney General of the state of Minnesota. Attorney General Ellison, you are recognized for your opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Paul, and thank you, Ranking Member. Thank you, Chairman Paul, and thank you, Ranking Member Peters, and thank you to all members of the committee. I'm Keith Ellison, and I'm the Minnesota Attorney General. Since early December, Minnesota has been the site of Operation Metro Surge, the largest single deployment of ICE agents in the history of the United States, the largest single immigration enforcement surge our country has ever seen. The surge has caused real harm to our state. Members of the committee, I respectfully ask you to exercise your oversight powers to do the following things. 1, require ICE to provide a full, transparent accounting of everyone stopped, detained, arrested, and deported from Minnesota during Operation Metro Surge. 2, require ICE to document the conditions of its detention facilities and to allow attorneys, healthcare professionals, clergy, and elected officials full access. 3, require the FBI to conduct investigations in partnership with Minnesota into the deaths of Renee Good and Alex Preddy and into every other use of excessive force. 4, require ICE to stop masking, stop the racial profiling, stop conducting warrantless searches. And finally, pass comprehensive immigration reform. I was so encouraged years ago when Senator Langford was leading that effort. it needs to be renewed. One question any rational person might ask is why? Why is this happening? Because it simply doesn't really make sense. Every rationale the administration has offered for this surge is really a pretext. The government has said the purpose of the surge is to fight unauthorized immigration, yet Minnesota ranks 28th among all states in the percentage of undocumented immigrants. Florida and Texas alone have nearly as many undocumented people as the entire population of the state of Minnesota. The government has said the purpose of the surge is to fight fraud in government programs. Well, of course, I hate fraud, and my office and I are already fighting it. We've convicted 300 people of Medicaid fraudsters in the last 7 years. The government did not surge, however, forensic accountants to Minnesota. They didn't surge in, computer experts. Instead, they sent 3,000 masked, armed men who are now kicking in doors, demanding papers, killing Minnesotans, not fighting fraud. The surge has hurt the fight against fraud. Because of it, a wave of experienced prosecutors have left the U.S. Attorney's Office in Minnesota, and the remaining staff are now drowning in a flood of habeas corpus petitions. The government has also said that the purpose of the surge was to fight violent crime and rid our streets of the worst of the worst. And yet violent crime rates in Minneapolis were falling before the surge. Furthermore, ICE's own data shows that 77% of those it has detained in Minnesota have no criminal record at all. Notoriously, some of those detained have been children. Is 5-year-old Liam Conejo Ramos the worst of the worst, or 10-year-old Elizabeth Zunia Casaguano? The surge is contributing to violent crime, members. It's contributing to violent crime. 2 of the 3 homicides committed in Minneapolis in 2026 have come at the hands of federal immigration agents. Recently, the government has said the purpose of the surge is to gain cooperation from state and local officials and immigration enforcement, but the Minnesota Department of Corrections already follows state law that requires Minnesota to notify federal authorities when a non-citizen incarcerated for a felony. Second, under Minnesota law, no jail can keep someone incarcerated on an ICE detainer longer than they're otherwise legally allowed to incarcerate them. This is not unique to Minnesota. Several of our federal and state courts have reached a broad consensus that aligns with our law. So after dismissing all of the pretexts, what's clear, this surge is all about what Donald Trump said it was all about. In a true social post on January 13th, he wrote, "Retribution and reckoning was coming to Minnesota." This war on Minnesota is retribution, to be sure. Our policies, our values, and how we vote, and it comes at a great cost. Senators, it comes at a cost of the lives of 2 U.S. citizens, Renee Good and Alex Preddy. It comes at the cost of shuttered businesses, Mr. Chairman, disruptions in education for tens of thousands of children, lasting harm to Minnesota's economic prosperity and social cohesion. And it comes at a cost, Mr. Chairman, to our Constitution. Under the 10th Amendment, the federal government may not compel or coerce states to enforce immigration laws or any other federal government priorities. And under the First Amendment, the government may not stifle speech or restrict the right of peaceful assembly. Operation Metro Surge routinely violates both these constitutional principles. So, Mr. Chairman, you'll never know how grateful I am that you called this hearing to discuss this matter. Mr. Ranking Member, I do appreciate it very much. The people of Minnesota care deeply about the health, safety, and constitutional right of their neighbors. And I have one final request of all senators, and that is directed to the administration. End the surge. End it now. It's already gone too far, and it must go no further. I yield back.
Paul Schnell serves as the Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Corrections. Commissioner Schnell, you are recognized for your opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Paul, Ranking Member Peters, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Paul Schnell, and I serve as Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Corrections. I appear before you as a career public safety professional, a former law enforcement officer, police chief, and now head of the State Corrections Agency. What is happening in Minnesota is not a dispute about whether immigration laws should be enforced. What is in question are the reasons for the unprecedented federal actions in our state and the tactics being used. 2 Minnesotans, both U.S. citizens, are dead following encounters with federal immigration agents. That alone warrants serious oversight, particularly in light of federal officials' unwillingness to allow a shared investigative process. Oversight must begin by separating fact from fiction. Our agency has worked hard to bring facts to light. Accuracy is not defiance. The latest false narrative is that Minnesota is a lawless sanctuary where dangerous criminals are allowed to slip through the cracks. That simply is not true. My written testimony is extensive, but I'd like to highlight 3 points. First, Minnesota honors immigration detainers and has coordinated with federal authorities for many years. Any suggestion that we refuse to cooperate or harbor non-citizens is baseless. Second, President Trump's request that serious offenders be deported before they serve their court-imposed sentences undermine both victim and state justice interests. Third, the execution of Operation Metro Surge has had tragic consequences. What has resulted is not controlled, target-focused enforcement, but an operation lacking planning, discipline, and constitutional restraint. It is both possible to respect civil liberties and engage in meaningful immigration enforcement. We as a country need DHS to respect that balance. Minnesota's experience shows us that unchecked enforcement can lead to tragedy and a profound loss of trust. Constitutional rights are not partisan issues. Government power must be checked and balanced, and law enforcement must operate within the law. Chairman Paul, members of the committee, I am here because I believe oversight is urgently needed. Minnesota seeks a return to law enforcement agencies respecting each other's roles, where enforcement is proportional and constitutional, and where the public can trust that government power is exercised responsibly and transparently. We are not there today, but with your help and continued advocacy from leaders who value the constitutional principles, I am hopeful we can get there again. Mr. Chairman, thank you for inviting me. I am prepared to answer your questions and assist the committee's inquiry in any way I can.
Thank you all for your testimony. I think there is a way we can get beyond, our differences on immigration and our differences on approach. And I think, but we have to look at this in a broad scope and try to leave some of that aside. I think there is no justification for bad behavior on them from law enforcement, whether it's your local police or others. It has to be investigated, needs to be corrected. You have to change your policies. You have to announce that you're going to do a better job. But I think there is an explanation for why there's 3,000 ICE agents in Minnesota. One explanation has been put forward was vindictive. Maybe, I don't know for sure, but I do know that if you tell people preemptively that your local police will not cooperate. So if ICE calls you up and says to Minneapolis, we have a guy, we're just presuming it's a guy because more bad people out there, unfortunately, are men than women. It's a guy, this bad guy, we want to pick him up. He's been convicted of an assault and he now needs to be deported. If the policy of Minneapolis is not to cooperate at all, I mean, there's going to be a real problem, and then they're going to say we need more ICE agents. So what happens right now, Mr. Ellison, Attorney General Ellison, if I'm from ICE and I call Minneapolis and I say, John Smith is wanted, and will you help us? Could we have 10 Minneapolis policemen go with 1 or 2 agents and arrest him? Or do we have to have 12 agents and no Minneapolis police? What happens?
Well, under Minnesota statute 631.50, anybody convicted of a felony who's in custody must be questioned about their nationality.
That's in custody. That's sort of a different question.
Okay.
I'm talking about somebody who's in the community and they need help arresting this person.
Right, but you said felony, so
You're right.
that's what
And
maybe.
that's a different, we'll talk about
Okay,
that.
yeah,
but
yeah.
Let's talk about somebody they want help, and is the local police force going to give them help, or do they have to bring in all ICE agents to do it?
Certainly targeted enforcement is not the problem, as has been said.
But I think that's what has been said of some of your policies, and the interpretation is that they don't have to and won't cooperate with ICE.
Well, Mr. Chairman, first of all, they're not my policies, just so all the members of the committee know. When you see advice or an advisory opinion coming from the Attorney General's office, this is not my opinion. It is the lawyers in my office's, my best analysis of what the law requires. So I say that to you because even if I didn't issue an opinion, the law would still be what it was.
But a month ago, if ICE called the local Minneapolis police and said, we want to arrest this person, will the Minneapolis police help ICE to arrest a person?
I think so, yes.
Well, and now we're at a question of facts.
But see, Mr.
I
Chairman,
think most people are arguing that that's not true and that that's a reason for the surge. If it is true, then the local officials need to say they will. But I mean, the mayor of Minneapolis said used crude language to tell them where to go. He didn't say, oh, we're not going to help you arrest 5-year-old boys because we think that's wrong. But if you have a rapist, we'll help you elect rapists, assault people, thieves, drug kingpins, etc. But it doesn't sound like that's what's happening to me. I mean, do you really think that it is happening? They're cooperating?
Yes, I do, Senator.
All right.
And let me just, if you'd allow me just to elaborate, I think that what we're dealing with is a difference of what the scenario is. If you're talking about a person who's been convicted of a crime where in targeted enforcement, you will see Minnesota officials make sure that person is addressed properly and deals with their consequences when it comes to immigration.
So Representative Niska, do you think the local police are cooperating if ICE calls them?
No, the public statements of Minneapolis officials have been that Minneapolis police will not assist in enforcing immigration. Perhaps they'll assist if there's some state crime that's alleged, but if ICE were to call in your scenario and say, we need to pick somebody up for violating immigration law, the Minneapolis public statements have been that they won't. And the example we saw just this last week of someone who was arrested with 50 pounds, an illegal immigrant arrested with 50 pounds of meth, and January 8th was allowed to go free and had to be taken by ICE last week.
Thank you. Mr. Schnell, I would like to know, and I've watched some of your interviews, so I am impressed with the idea that ICE was saying there was 1,300 people. You reviewed them. Some of these people aren't in Minnesota, never were in Minnesota. Some have been released to ICE themselves, and their list is just flat out wrong. The most impressive thing I heard in one of your interviews was that somebody named Lou Mua was a person that they were, saying this is why we have to break down doors because this terrible person. Sounds like he probably is a terrible person, but you said he was in jail already and he had a detainer. So I think that truth needs to be explored if that is really happening. There used to be, people said, a direct portal though. So when you did it or somebody got booked, it went directly to ICE. Does that still exist, or do you have to do them one at a time in prison?
So, Mr. Chair, at present, we provide notification in accordance with law to ICE when they come in. There are systems that are available to people to be able to get that, for ICE to be able to get.
Told that Mayorkas stopped the portal, and the portal was a very fast portal, sort of automatically done. True or not true?
It is true that there is a portal that ICE can access.
It was stopped under Mayorkas.
I believe so.
Okay, but you still do your job, you do your detainers in. And so one of the questions goes back to Attorney General Morris's point. So, and look, I'm a stickler for the law. I'm a libertarian on these issues. If detaining somebody who's already served their sentence doesn't make sense to me. But here's my question. If someone is in your prison for 5 years, which some of them are going to be in prison 5 years, they're also wanted and they're at a detainer, which means they haven't had their judgment. Why couldn't we go to immigration court during the 5 years in prison? Does that happen? And why doesn't it happen?
Mr. Chairman, I believe there are some rare instances where we have had people who have had immigration proceedings while they've been in custody and, where removal.
That would answer some of the questions. Then you have a final court judgment. You go through a court, he's going to be represented, and we're going to go through the final judgment. And then Attorney General's problem that, they've not a detainer's a request, not a conviction, then they would have had their conviction, and it's much easier. But they also, if it's seamlessly working, is it most of the time when you notify ICE, are they showing up on the day they're going to release and it's a peaceful turnover, or are they doing it half the time, 20% of the time, 100% of the time? How's it working?
Mr. Chairman, I think there has been wide-scale cooperation for a long time. We have had, excellent experiences, and the local staff of the Department of Corrections and the local ICE office are very effective.
Senator Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Schnell, has ICE or anyone else at DHS attempted to coordinate their operations with state and local law enforcement, or even notified them when they are conducting immigration enforcement, according to your knowledge?
Senator, I believe this is one of the challenges, and may speak a little bit to the chairman's earlier question, that there has not been a planful approach. There has not been efforts to coordinate or discuss their targets. We have not been provided with a list of targets, as for instance, where there could be some opportunities where we have those dangerous people that represent a risk to Minnesota's public safety that we could coordinate. So that has not happened.
So it hasn't. They have not been attempting to coordinate with local law enforcement, is what you've seen. And you have your current experience. You also have a long and distinguished career as in police in the community, including a police chief for a number of communities. So they have not coordinated, to your knowledge. So what danger to public safety and local law enforcement does this lack of coordination from DHS result in?
Well, I think, Senator, what we see is a situation that is crisis driven. And I think the challenges are when things get out of hand, then it was we need local law enforcement to protect ICE and ICE operations. When in fact, if coordination had happened from the get-go, I think a lot of this could have been avoided. And there's a long history, whether it's Minneapolis Police, the Department of Corrections, any law enforcement in Minnesota, of strong collaboration with federal partners. For instance, the Department of Homeland Security Investigations Division does a lot of work with transnational drug investigations that on task forces that law enforcement are actively involved in. And these are really positive and important public safety ventures. And yet, this particular intrusion into the state really was done solely by them without coordination. And that has created, I think, a public safety mess for our state and something that I think we should all be concerned about.
Well, that's significant. So they are not reaching out to try to coordinate an action. It sounds like from your testimony, if I'm correct, it's only when it gets a crisis situation because it's out of control that they had lost control. Then they call for help from the police. Please help us. We're messing this operation up.
I think, Senator, that's precisely, I think, what we have seen over the course of time is that as things became more crisis oriented after the two shootings, the two deaths, then there was this need for collaboration and securing ICE agents and even the local ICE facility in Minneapolis.
Okay. So lack of attempt to even coordinate at the front end is a significant problem. And I hear you. Attorney General Ellison, I'm going to ask you another related question to that coordination. Can you describe the coordination between DHS or DOJ with the state and local officials into the investigations of the tragic shootings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy?
We haven't had any Senator, we haven't had any cooperation up until now, which is really unusual because in prior cases where where there's been a federal and state interest in a crime, we've seen collaboration between federal and state authorities. It's how we normally do work. It's not unusual at all. And in fact, this situation, when we were told you can't have access to the evidence, to the crime scene, that was highly unusual and surprising to us. And so we're hoping that we can gain cooperation, perhaps in the Preddy matter, but we've been advised that the Good matter is the feds are not investigating it, and we still haven't received any access to the evidence that is involved in that case. So it's an unusual, strange situation, but we're with good faith, hoping that things will change.
So that's important. You're saying in the past they've worked with you or other folks.
Yeah.
But in these two cases, they're stonewalling you?
That's a yes. That's a yes.
Wow. Well, Commissioner Schnell, as a former local police chief, as I mentioned earlier, is cutting out law enforcement, cutting out local law enforcement a common and effective way to actually conduct an investigation?
Senator, no. I think, the operations, as the Attorney General pointed out, of close collaboration and sharing of evidence. And we saw that in rather significant cases where there was both a local investigation and prosecution, as well as a federal investigation and prosecution in other cases. So, I think as we look at the public safety of Minnesota, the public safety of our country, collaboration between law enforcement and focused and targeted enforcement on issues of critical importance, whether that's human trafficking or large-scale drug interdictions, these things need to continue, and we need to get back on track for those matters. And I think that's where success can happen. That's where success has happened in collaboration, but that's not what's happening currently as we see in Minneapolis and Minnesota.
Okay. So the next question is to both of you. This administration has basically demanded that Minnesota state and local agencies use their extremely limited resources to basically subsidize DHS operations, is what we're hearing. Now, this is despite DHS receiving well over $100 billion from the Republican spending bill to conduct the kinds of operations we're seeing on these streets. So given recent reporting that only 14% of arrests made by DHS are individuals with a criminal record, would you say this is a good use of those limited state resources that you have to protect people on the streets of your local communities, to help ICE round up mothers on their way to work or children getting off the school bus, or should you be using that to fight crime on your streets and making the people safe in your communities? And how does that strain your ability to provide public safety for the residents that you serve? Attorney General Ellison, you want to take the first stab?
Yeah, well, Senator, look, crime in Minnesota and in Minneapolis has been going down. We're grateful for that, but we still need every resource we can to protect public safety. And the fact is, resources are very limited. I think that given the proper circumstances, legal cooperation makes sense, but we simply don't have the state budget to be deputized to carry out functions that are reserved constitutionally to the federal government. That's their business. We have our business, and where we can work together, that's a good idea, but we simply cannot just convert our resources over to the federal government.
So,
Senator, I simply can't imagine how many dollars have been spent in Operation Metro Surge. It's staggering. The cost of human life, as well as just the actual financial resources, is hard to even imagine, especially when we look at the numbers that we're talking about. When we look at what is happening operationally, it becomes hard to understand. And certainly taking resources away from the local community would be contrary to public safety in our state. And I think it's also important to say that, we didn't ask for this level of assistance. I think we have seen crime go down in our state. And this certainly has not been ultimately beneficial to the safety of our state.
Thank you.
Senator Johnson.
So a lot of what we heard here today literally makes no sense. When you look at the history of returns and removals, the Obama administration, first Trump administration, you have to kind of throw out Biden. It was such an aberration. Obama, on average, they returned and removed about 650,000 people a year. Trump in his first term, about 500,000. It's lower than Obama. This first year, there have been a little under 600,000 returns and removals. That's a lot, but it's not a whole lot when you realize we flooded, who knows how many, at least probably 10 million people, if not more, during the Biden administration, and created this enormous mess. By the way, including that, according to DHS, 650,000 criminals that are at large. They're not detained. 15,000 murderers. 20,000 people convicted of sexual assault. I mean, that's the mess that the Democrat and President Biden's open border policy created that the Trump administration is trying to clean up. But they deported close to 600,000 people under this administration, and in most states and most cities, there aren't protests. There aren't protesters being shot. Obviously, problems in Los Angeles, probably Portland. These places that claim to be sanctuary cities, that sounds like, Attorney General Ellison is denying the fact that, we cooperate with ICE. I think Representative Niska wouldn't agree with that. So again, I'm trying to square this circle going, this doesn't make sense to me. I wish we had the government officials, the DHS officials, our next panel on this one, just to refute this, to rebut it. We had a very interesting hearing last week on the fraud in Minnesota, and we had State Senator Mark Cron. And in his testimony, he was talking about local reports of something like 30,000, they call them observers, being trained. Okay, I thought that was an incredible figure. I'm not saying that there actually were, but it certainly sounds that there are activists being trained. Are you aware of training?
Amendment activity, sir.
Yeah, were you aware of the signal chats? I believe it was the Lieutenant Governor of Minnesota was actually helping manage one of those signal chats for deploying those trained activists to the legal law enforcement actions. Or were you aware of that signal chat that's being used to deploy those people?
I'm aware it exists, but this is First Amendment activity, sir.
Okay.
This is that the law.
Did you ever encourage people to go out there and exercise the First
Yeah, I do.
Right? I
freely admit being in favor of the First Amendment.
You encourage trained activists to put themselves into harm's way because you had to know, because you were watching this, that there were scuffles at least, that these people were obstructing justice. I would think you'd actually, as the chief law enforcement officer of Minnesota, be concerned about people obstructing justice. So, putting their cars in streets, blocking roads. I would think as chief law enforcement, you would be concerned about that. But were you ever concerned about encouraging, I guess, people to support you to go out and put themselves into harm's way?
No, we never.
Impeding and obstructing illegal law enforcement action. Did that ever concern you?
Sir, that never happened. We all times said, if you want to protest, protest peacefully, protest safely, but you'll never find me being against the First Amendment.
Right now, but
I'll always be for the First Amendment.
You were seeing the scuffles, right? You were seeing and by the way, Minneapolis police officials could not help protect ICE officials, right? I mean, Representative Niska, isn't that, when you're talking about the nullification of federal law, isn't that one of the, handpinned that they simply could not help and protect ICE in their legal law enforcement actions?
The Minneapolis Police Department issued guidance in July saying that they would not even help with crowd control around immigration operations. And Minnesota leaders encouraged that kind of action. The Minnesota Lieutenant Governor encouraged people to put their bodies on the line.
I can't imagine encouraging somebody that supported me politically to go and put themselves into harm's way. I can't imagine that, particularly when you know that these law enforcement officials had been shot at, a couple of illegal immigrants inadvertently killed because people were shooting at ICE officers. Their vehicles have been rammed by some of these peaceful protesters, probably the trained activists. They've had rocks thrown at their vehicles. I can't imagine encouraging people, put yourselves in harm's way. Get out there and record that. I, as a government official, would have said, back off. Let us work with ICE. Let's cooperate with them. Let's see if we can't de-escalate this. But Attorney General, you did the exact opposite. And 2 people are dead because you encouraged them to put themselves into harm's way. And now you're exploiting those 2 martyrs. That was a tragedy. It never should have happened. Now, we can investigate, but I can't imagine being a law enforcement official where I know my colleagues have been shot at, their vehicles rammed, that their trained activists deployed. And by the way, we know at least one of those activists had a semi-automatic pistol with extra clips. So now you're an ICE officer, you're doing enforcement action, you've got a team behind you trying to protect you, you've got all these trained activists behind you. Is it any wonder they're at hair trigger alert? A tragedy was going to happen and you encouraged it. And you ought to feel damn guilty about it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so sit there and smirk. Smirk. It's sick. It is despicable.
Are you asking me for comment, Senator? Because everything you said was untrue. It was a nice theatrical performance, but it was all lies.
Senator Hassan.
You disgusting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're here today because Americans are outraged by the deliberate intimidation, trampling of civil rights, and lawlessness from this administration that has left 2 Americans shot dead, 2 American citizens shot dead by masked federal agents. And with respect to my colleague from Wisconsin, there is a long tradition in this country, especially in the civil rights movement, which finally brought us out of the Jim Crow era, of peaceful, nonviolent demonstration where people are trained so that when they are attacked, even by law enforcement who are escalating, they know how to stay calm. And it is because of that kind of nonviolent First Amendment activity that we were finally able to pass civil rights laws in this country. Immigration enforcement needs to combine strong border security with a targeted, focused effort on removing violent criminals. Instead, this administration's divisive, dangerous, and deadly actions are making our communities less safe. Today's hearing provides an important opportunity for us to hear from those on the ground and those in charge, because what is happening today is unacceptable to the people in my state of New Hampshire and to people from every corner, and in fact, people around the globe. Since I just got back from the country of Greenland, they know this too, and their children are scared of the United States of America. I hope that my Republican colleagues will continue the bipartisan conversations that some of us have been trying to have and are necessary to enact meaningful, common sense reforms to keep our communities safe. Now, to Mr. Schnell, last month, President Trump stated that Minnesota officials should turn over all criminal illegal aliens that are currently incarcerated in their state prisons and jails to federal authorities. As the head of the Department of Corrections, you run Minnesota's prisons, and in your testimony, you described how your department already works with ICE to transfer non-citizen prisoners in your custody to federal custody. You all do that. So you're doing your part and you are working within the law to coordinate with ICE. I'd just like to hear from you, given your years of experience in law enforcement. Have the actions of ICE and the Trump administration improved effective law enforcement and cooperation in Minnesota, or have they made it more difficult?
Senator, the current operation makes it much more difficult. And I think, you know, the levels of misinformation do become challenging. In fact, just in the past few days, in the White House X account, there was a post about the ICE's removal of the worst from Minnesota streets. And they cited Mr. Abdi Rashid Aleem, his arrest and removal from Minnesota, when in fact, Mr. Aleem was released directly to ICE on May 1st of 2025 from the Department of Corrections. And so this misinformation, I think, makes it much more challenging for law enforcement. And I think it's so contrary to the way it has historically been in terms of collaboration. And, you know, this is one of the challenges I think we face.
Thank you. You also talked in your testimony about trust, saying, quote, "The erosion of trust between DHS and Minnesota is at the core of this crisis, and I suspect we will feel its repercussions for years to come." This is an incredibly important point. The greatest responsibility a government has is keeping its citizens safe. But that can't come at the cost of freedom and liberty. These things all have to work together, or you lose the trust of your citizens. And all across our country, and in my state of New Hampshire, law enforcement and communities work together in this way to work to be safe. So having lived this experience, what do you see as some of the repercussions of this loss of trust, and what can we do to rebuild it?
Senator, I think it happens here with this, and we'll start with this committee and with Congress taking, you know, some clear action to address and rebuild the legitimacy and trust in ICE. And there, we want to be clear, there is a legitimate need for immigration enforcement and for addressing those people who represent, in particular, a threat to public safety. But I think what we want is to return to the days where there is close collaboration, as you described, where we can focus on key issues of community and public safety across our country. Things like transnational large-scale drug efforts, as well as human trafficking. These are really important issues that there has been longstanding collaboration. And I worry that because of what's happening today, those efforts will be lost, or we will not invest the kinds of resources that are needed in those areas.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I guess one last question. I come from a small state, but we have 234 cities and towns. And some of our police departments are a few officers. Our larger cities have, many more than that. But can you talk about the realistic need to cooperate and plan when you have limited resources? It sounds to me that some of what the administration is asking the state of Minnesota or the community of Minneapolis to do is turn over its entire police force to ICE to do their work, and then drawing them away from investigating state crimes, which is, of course, incredibly important. Can you just talk about that for a second?
Senator, Minneapolis, like many communities across the country, have limited resources and have profound need on the policing front. And so it has to be targeted and focused on the needs of those communities and diverting this away. In fact, we can go back and look at the president's task force on 21st century policing from 2015, just 11 years ago, that really focused on the need for there to be an effort, but the decoupling of immigration enforcement from local law enforcement. And that doesn't mean that there isn't collaboration, and we need to focus on the right kinds of targets, but it does speak to the fact that local law enforcement has a role, as does federal immigration efforts. And I think recognizing the differences there does become critically important. And, law enforcement agencies across the state want to work together, need to work together, but there also has to be appropriate focus on the needs of a particular community, large or small.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Langford.
Chair Paul, thank you. Thank you all for coming here in the conversation today. I do want to bring a couple of things here. One is news for those of y'all that are here on the panel. You probably have not seen yet that Tom Homan has announced that they are standing down Operation Metro Surge in a press conference during this time period. He also announced that they have had 4,000 total arrests of folks that are undocumented in Operation Metro Surge, identified over 3,300 children that were unaccompanied minors that we didn't know their whereabouts. They were lost during the last administration, that those kids were also identified as far as where they are. We have some kids that have been lost into labor trafficking and all kinds of things on it. They've done that. So there is some news that's happening. I also want to be able to correct the record on a couple of things I've heard just even in conversation today. This number of 14% of the folks have a criminal record that ICE has detained is actually not an accurate number. That number is 14% of violent criminals. That's murders and rapes. 70% of the folks that are arrested nationwide have a criminal record. And so it's interesting that I guess there's some folks that don't see as important to arresting folks with 5 DUIs or that are drug dealers or robbery. They're just interested in getting murderers and this out. But I would say for most people in my state, if they have a criminal record, they're interested in those folks being removed from the country. So 70% of the folks have been arrested nationwide by ICE in the past year do have a criminal record of some point, not 14%. Attorney General Ellison, you and I served together in the House years ago together, so we've known each other a long time on it. You made a comment earlier about me trying to be able to work to be able to solve things. During the Biden administration, I made it very, very clear. I'll work with anybody that will stop the chaos that was happening at our border during that time period. At the time, I was working with the Biden administration and trying to find a solution with 12,000 people a day that were illegally crossing our border, a day. Almost none of them had any background checks at all. We literally had no idea who they were, and we had 70,000 people that even the Biden administration identified as special interest aliens coming from areas of known terrorism, but we didn't know who they were. 70,000 just in 2024. So you're correct. I was willing to work with anyone to try to make that stop because it was absolutely out of control. I look at what's happening in Minnesota, and it's been a great conversation and try to just figure out things. ICE did a surge in New Orleans. This didn't happen. ICE did a surge in North Carolina. This didn't happen. When I look at my state and other states in the cooperation, there what's the cooperation? How many 287 agreements are there in Minnesota at this point?
Yeah, so the position that my office has taken is that if you are a sheriff who wants to do a pursuit 287G, you must have the support of your county board under what the law is.
So how many agreements are like that?
I think 7 is the last number I heard, but there's no barrier. We're not saying that people can't do 287G agreements. We're saying that there is a procedure that they have to follow that involves engaging with their county board. That's all.
So I guess my challenge is, if there's someone arrested in Minnesota, let's say they've got 3 DUIs and they're arrested and they're incarcerated, and it comes up and pings in the records that this person also has a murder warrant in Oklahoma, would they be held until Oklahoma authorities came to get them at that point, or would they, at the end of whatever the term, be released? If Oklahoma reached out and said, hey, we want that person, I know you're prosecuting them, but before you release them, we want them, don't let go of them until we get there, what would happen in that situation?
I'm confident that Minnesota would honor Oklahoma's request.
Okay, how is that different in other places with ICE detainers? So if ICE reaches out and says, hey, this person's not legally present in the country, a court has already ruled they have a final order of removal, they need to be removed, would they be held until ICE gets there?
If there is a final order of removal,
right,
then Mr. Schneller would be the best person to answer the question, but the answer is, yeah, ICE will be notified. Those people are going to be picked up. Those people are being picked up. And Senator, again, I did appreciate the work that you were doing on immigration. And I want to be clear that I think we need to return to that level of bipartisan cooperation. And I hope that you can continue in that direction. But one of my problems is that a lot of the reasons that the federal administration's giving for targeting Minnesota aren't justified based on the law.
Right, but so I guess my first question is, if someone has a final order of removal from an immigration court, should they be removed?
Yes.
Okay, so then the argument from ICE is that sometimes they do a detainer, and by the time they got there, they've been released already. They're not actually there. Is that occurring?
Well, I
Because
can,
I would say if Oklahoma contacts Minnesota and says, hold them till we get there, or if ICE contacts them and says, hold them till we get there, what's the difference?
if it is if somebody's been convicted of a felony, that person is going to be, there will be questioning as to what their nationality is. That information will be reported to ICE. Now, under a case which is based on federal and state law in Minnesota called Esparza versus Nobles County, if the person's not convicted of anything and there's an ICE detainer that's there, then ICE has to get them because they could not be held beyond the time that the
Right.
state have legitimate reason
But the
to
question
hold
is,
them.
are they notified in enough time for ICE to be able to get there? Because ICE's statement is, hey, we're going to get there as quick as we can, but it takes 2 agents to come pick somebody up if they're already being detained. It takes 8 agents to go get them if they're on the street somewhere. So their desire is, hey, if you've got somebody, even if they haven't been convicted, they've just been arrested, but they do have a final order of removal, ICE is going to contact and say, hey, I want to do this. And Shaniska was just saying before that a stat of 8% of ICE detainers being honored. I want to ask you about that.
So we're talking about a final order of removal, somebody who's in Minnesota state custody. I'm confident that these people are being picked up. If there is no final order of removal, if there's no felony conviction, if the person is still pre-trial, then it would be a rearrest and a detention from the state of Minnesota if we were to continue to hold them beyond Minnesota's authority to hold them. So we cannot just say we're going to hold you because ICE wants you if it's a non-felony situation
All right, we'll
where
follow-
there's no conviction.
I'm past my time. We'll follow up with the ICE agents in a little bit and get a chance to
I
get
think
clarification.
it's a great subject and hits on sort of the point. And I think if you were to issue a statement saying that final orders will be obeyed by the every county and every municipality and every police department, the final orders would be obeyed, including a final order that we now have a final order, and the guy that lives at this address, you'll send the Minneapolis police with the ICE agents to that house. Would you issue that order?
That's already the law.
Well, I think nobody's cooperating and nobody believes there's an amount of cooperation. So I think issuing that order or issue a public statement. Would you issue a public statement that reiterates the law that with final orders you do? And then it brings up the other problem. Maybe we need more final orders and maybe ICE needs to be told to go to court and get final orders and then that you will comply with that. But I think they need to be told from you that you will actually comply if that is the distinction. That you don't like detainers because they're not a final court order and that you will obey final court orders. I think the people of America and the people of Minneapolis would do better, Minnesota, to hear from you that you will obey final orders. And then we have to figure out how come we don't have enough final orders and how come we haven't adjudicated these things. And then we're isolating in on the problem.
Senator, I have and will state Minnesota law clearly as many times as I need to, but I just want to be clear, that's not why we're here. We're here because of other political considerations, not because of something Minnesota is doing wrong.
I think that's sidestepping the issue. Senator Kim?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you to the three of you for coming out. Attorney General, I wanted to start with you. I was going through the Minnesota state website and pulled up some facts here. I just want to make sure they sound about right. It was saying that there's about 585 police within the Minneapolis police. Does that sound roughly right?
Yeah, the city of Minneapolis has about that many police officers.
And about 561 in St. Paul.
Accurate.
And then about 620 in the Minnesota State Patrol. Does that sound about right? So we're talking about around 1,700 for some of the largest areas as well as the State Patrol. What was the total number of federal agents deployed at the height of the surge?
Well, there were the ones that they started with, and then 3,000 more after that. And my numbers suggest to me, so there's somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 are the best estimates. We don't have an exact, precise number. My numbers are that's about 8 to 10% of all ICE agents in America.
I have to say that when we were talking today about the different rules and the different ways in which they can organize between the federal and the state, but when I learned about just the sheer number and the contrast to the proportion on the ground, that was really shocking to me, because I don't think I fully understood that coming from New Jersey. So, Attorney General, I just kind of wanted to ask you, like, how did it feel on the ground when you have that much presence at the federal level of these officers beyond what you were saying, 2 to 3 times the total number of state and local officers?
It felt like our state was targeted, blanketed with paramilitaries everywhere who were approaching citizens, non-citizens, whoever. It felt like we were being occupied by the federal government. And I started returning, Senator, to reading about how the Boston Massacre, how did those Bostonians feel when a faraway government in England had imperial troops marching all over their city, harassing and abusing the citizenry? That's kind of how I felt.
I heard that word a lot used by others in Minnesota in the press, of just feeling occupied, just feeling like you don't have the ability to be able to control your own state and have this imposed upon you. So I just really wanted to hit that home, because again, we're having a lot of talks about what level of cooperation and whatnot, but I think this committee needs to look at just the sheer volume, the sheer number of federal agents, and what kind of signal that sends to Minnesota and to those on the ground. And look,
Senator Kim, can I make one quick point?
Yes, of course.
Forgive me, my apologies. So the thing is, it has been said there have been surges in other states, and we haven't had these kind of problems. The reason why is there's never been on this scale. We just simply haven't seen this level of scale in other cities. This is the single largest deployment of ICE, of immigration agents in the history of our country. So I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, absolutely. It's important to be able to hear. And sure, we heard the news from Homeland saying that they're announcing the end of the surge. And this comes on the heels just a couple of days ago of Trump saying he's not backing down. So, we're, I think, seeing the importance of oversight, of accountability, and the voice of the American people, and especially the people of Minnesota, who, as far as I can tell, seem like they have disapproved of ICE, and seems like they're saying ICE has gone too far. And that's not just falling on partisan lines, is it, Attorney General? It seems like it's across the board.
There's a well-known conservative podcaster. His name's Michael Broadcorp. He's written, this guy's a conservative. He's nobody's liberal, right? He's a conservative. It is a broad-based objection that Minnesotans are making. Now, not everyone, of course, but but whether from the left to the center to the right, people are very disturbed by the engagement that they've been receiving from ICE officials and Border Patrol agents.
So despite the fact that the surge looks like it's ending and going back down, I think we can all say that damage has been done. There is also no admission of wrongdoing or wrongdoing of tactics by this administration, and it bodes questions about what comes next, not just for Minnesota, but where else are these agents going to go next? I think also part of this gets to, what does it take to heal? What is it going to take to help the people of Minnesota heal? And Attorney General, you talked about just the lack of an independent investigation here. Is that something that would be important for the people of Minnesota to know, that there is a true independent investigation that involves state and local participation?
Yes, Senator. I know that there's a diversity of views on this esteemed committee, but I would hope that all would agree that we need transparency in terms of the activities of ICE, transparency in terms of the conditions of detention facilities, access to those facilities, a full, fair, and joint investigation into the deaths of Good and Preddy, and into the masking. Nobody in this committee has police officers who run around wearing masks. I'm certain that Senator Paul, Kentucky police officers and state troopers don't wear masks. We cannot impose on people what we would not accept for ourselves and then call ourselves fair. And finally, I want to just encourage Senator Lankford to continue his work on comprehensive immigration reform.
Mr. Schnell, I wanted to turn to you because some of what Holman said, and I know you didn't have privy to see his what he said today announced, but he said that part of the reason why they're able to end the surge is now that there's a willingness on state and local to be able to cooperate. But with your testimony said today, sounded like you were already willing to cooperate, but that also that they weren't reaching out, that they weren't providing the efforts to be able to share their targets and whatnot. Can you go into that a little bit more?
Senator, I think, I think if there is a positive of Mr. Holman being dispatched to Minnesota, has been at least efforts to have discussions with local officials, efforts to try and gain a level of discipline among the agents that were dispatched to the state. Those things have been, I think, very, very positive. And yet, I think we still see, some lack of cooperation. I've had the opportunity to meet with Mr. Holman and have positive conversations. And yet, I think some of the struggles have been information sharing is an ongoing issue. We have provided information to them around the people in our custody who are non-citizens and who do not have detainers yet. And there's about 100 of them. And so we want to make sure that there is full accountability. And so, we're pleased.
And also with stopping some of the misinformation that was put out there.
100%.
With that, I'll yield back.
Senator Hawley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ellison, let me start with you. You're the Attorney General of the state of Minnesota. Do I have that correct? That's a yes?
Sir, you're aware of my job. You know the answer to that.
You're not going to answer my questions? Are we going to start this way? Are you the Attorney General of the state of Minnesota? Yes or no?
You know the answer.
Mr. Ellison, you're in my courtroom now. You're under oath. So I suggest that you answer my questions. You the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the state of Minnesota? Yes or no? Let's try another question. Are you familiar with the $9 billion in historic fraud out of your state, including the $250 million in the Feeding Our Future program alone? You familiar with that? Don't turn to the pages in your book to get your potted answers. Are you familiar with it? Yes or no?
Yes, I am familiar with it.
Very familiar, aren't you? Because the people who ran the Feeding Our Futures program came to you in your official office in the state capitol December 11th, 2021, and asked for your help in getting investigators off their backs. They complained to you for upwards of an hour about state investigators going after them, and they begged you to help them, and you agreed to it, amazingly. And we know you did.
That's not
because
true.
It's all caught on tape.
Yeah,
every single sentence is caught on tape. Here's what you said. Let's take a look.
Obviously,
You said, it's not a question. You said to them, send me the names of all these folks who are investigating them. You said to them, send me their names, and I'll take that list, and I'll call the person over at Education who is investigating them and say, what's going on? Why am I getting these complaints? Then you went on to say, I already have my team working on this. What day should we get together to discuss it again? You made pledge after pledge to them. You said, we've got to make sure this guy who's investigating them stops it. You said, you have my attention. I'm concerned about this. You said, let's go fight these people, meaning the people who were investigating the fraud. Why'd you do it? Why'd you help them?
Are you going to let me answer?
Please, we're all ears.
So first of all, you're cherry picking quotes out of there.
Why did you help them?
I thought you were going to let me answer.
Why did you
Are you
help
going to let
them?
me answer?
Why did you help
You
them?
let me answer and I'll answer you.
Tell the truth and I'll let you answer.
I will tell the truth.
Good.
Let's do that.
That'd be a nice change. Why'd you help them?
No, now see, Mr. Chairman, I didn't come here to be insulted. I came here voluntarily.
You came here for the truth. Let's have it.
I
Why
didn't
did you
come
help
here
them? The quotes are here. They're in
Look,
black and white, and every
Yeah.
member of this audience
And they're
can listen to the recording. It's 54 minutes long. It's all in public. You can Google it right now and listen to it.
And listen to it
Why'd
all.
you help them?
First of all, I didn't help them.
You did help them.
No, I did not. I certainly didn't.
You're saying you didn't do anything for them. You didn't.
Well, wait a minute.
I already have my team working on this again. That's not you.
I have
It's a ventriloquist?
my team assisted with the information that led to the prosecution and conviction of these people.
No, you didn't. You didn't lift
Yes,
a finger
we
to
did.
prosecute them. No, you did not. You
No,
didn't
because
lift a
it
finger
was
to
a
prosecute
federal
them.
prosecution.
You had, BS. You had whistleblowers come to you as early as 2019.
You're the one talking.
Hey, listen. It's my time.
Doesn't know.
It to them, and they talked repeatedly about money. In fact, it's all they talked
That's
about.
a lie.
Money. They
True.
said, we
Untrue.
will put our dollars in the right place. We will support candidates that will fight to protect our interests. You replied, that's right. They said, if you are
that is
securing
not
your
true.
donor base and securing your power base, you can act the way you want. You replied, money is freedom. They said the amount of money circulate. I'm reading the transcript. The amount of money circulating in our community today is powerful, and we haven't realizing it in a meaningful way. And you said, give me the specifics. And 9 days later, you took $10,000
That's a lie.
from people who were then indicted. It's in your reports. Why'd
Sir,
you do it?
Sir,
Was it worth it?
You know what? This is a theatrical performance.
10,000. This is the truth.
It
This is
has
what
nothing
accountability
to do-
looks like, of which you've had none.
No.
You helped fraudsters defraud your
Lie.
state and this government of $9
Sir,
billion, and
sir,
you got a
this is-
fat campaign contribution out of it.
This is completely
You ought to be indicted.
True. Well,
That's the truth.
I think we've made the point. Let's keep the tenor
Well,
just
for
a
the
little more
record,
calm.
Oh, I'll ask how I want
he's
to,
lying,
Senator Paul.
and that's the truth.
Oh no, this is all on the record,
no, sir.
Did you bother
You are-
Did you bother to investigate where the money that you facilitated their fraud for, where it went? Do you know where it went, what it was used for, the fraudulent money? I do, because we just heard testimony about it yesterday.
Because we
The
were
funds
key
went to-
players in the
Hundreds of millions of dollars to
Yes,
terrorist
we
groups,
do.
to
No.
transnational criminal organizations, to the drug trade, futures, and you blew them off. Listen, your own state newspaper
That's a lie.
investigated. The attorney, nothing. You did
My-
nothing for years. The only action you took is,
False statement.
once all these fraudsters came to your office
It is a
and asked you to get
false
involved
statement.
and offered you money,
Did not come to
then
my
you got
office.
involved.
They
Then
did
you
not-
took the money, and
they-
then you got involved.
They did not come to my office. You're completely wrong about that.
You met with
I
them
did
for
not take
54
anybody's money.
minutes, and you took $10,000, and they also gave your family money. They gave your family thousands of dollars in campaign contributions in addition to what they gave
a false
you.
statement.
Let's put the
This is this is completely untrue.
the New York Post.
Yeah, we know the New York Post.
Minnesota Keith Ellison, AG, accepted campaign donations from individuals linked to the $250 million COVID fraud scheme after they were in your office. The donations came on December 20th.
Sir,
You
this
met
is
with them
not-
on December the 11th, and on January 20th, the FBI knocked over their headquarters.
No.
That's the sequence. of events here.
No, it's not.
You've
the
been
sequence
right
of
at the
events.
center of this fraud
It's not
thing
the
from
sequence
the
of
beginning,
events.
and
It's
you've
untrue.
enabled it. And sir,
The false
you
statement.
should resign.
And sir, you should resign. I was thinking the same thing about you.
Should resign.
You,
Thank you,
I was
Mr.
thinking
Chairman.
the exact same thing about you.
I'm sure after encountering
Yeah,
this
yeah.
truth, you are, because
No,
it
no,
hurts to have
because
accountability, doesn't it?
Because after this parade
It
of
hurts to have
lies and
accountability.
presentation,
Time has
I think you should be
expired.
ashamed for misrepresentation.
Time has expired. Senator Moreno.
Unexpected next witness. They're expecting somebody on the other side.
Oh, should I go on to Blumenthal? What
So,
it was?
let me ask,
Excuse me a second. I made a mistake.
I
I'm
thought
supposed to
so.
go to the other side. Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses for being here this morning. General Ellison, I want to ask you about law enforcement generally, and especially as it applies here as a former Attorney General myself and a former United States Attorney. I'm very concerned about the lack of working together, not just coordination or cooperation, but actually joint work together here. You know, this is routine because law enforcement is not about red and blue. It's about trying to apprehend and prosecute wrongdoers, to deter others, to punish the ones who did it. We've been told this morning that Operation Metro Surge is over. But this issue is much bigger than just Minneapolis. It's about an out-of-control agency that is imposing brutality and violence in neighborhoods across the country. And the hearing that we held, spotlight hearing last week, had witnesses who were shot and shot at, U.S. citizens with no criminal background whatsoever, in Chicago and California. This kind of brutality is happening across the country. So I think it really is a national issue. I appreciate your leadership on a national level to try to bring some sanity and rationality here. You were asked earlier by Senator Peters about the lack of cooperation in the investigations of Renee Good and Alex Preddy's death. Absolutely tragic, but it's not just a lack of cooperation, I believe. Hasn't the federal government actually impeded your efforts to investigate by withholding evidence that was provided by state and local authorities and now is kept from you when you want to undertake a legitimate law enforcement investigation? Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Senator, we certainly hope this situation does change. But up until now, particularly on the Good matter, we have been denied access to critical evidence in the case to evaluate it. Information like the car, the gun, shell casings, other critical information needed to complete an evaluation and an investigation we simply haven't had access to. We hope this changes. And you mentioned the presence of Tom Homan. I can tell you that with Secretary Noem and with Mr. Bovino, we didn't have any engagement at all. Perhaps now with somebody who has experience of their own in law enforcement, we can make some progress. I'm hopeful, but up until now, the situation is, as you described, we've been denied access to critical information. We need to complete an investigation.
And the denial of information raised the issue of what is happening to that evidence. We know, having tried cases, that presenting it in court involves establishing a chain of custody, so as to show there was no tampering with the evidence, which is critical in crimes like the ones that allegedly were committed in the alleged murders of Preddy and Good. That kind of chain of custody, the preservation of the integrity of the evidence, is critical to any prosecution or conviction. And I'm really concerned that the failure to provide this evidence or to attest to chain of custody, in effect, amounts to a cover-up.
You know, a lot of Minnesotans have used that word, Senator, and I hope that we can, my biggest hope is we can move on from here. I think everybody who's ever done police investigation, crime investigation, knows that there is a state interest and a federal interest. That's why collaboration is the norm. And I think that most people know that that information has got to be shared with everybody who has an interest in establishing truth in public safety. The fact that we haven't been doing it in this situation, I'm hoping that with the help of this committee, with the help of Mr. Holman, perhaps, that we're going to get into a better place. But so far, we've been denied. And it's deeply disappointing because, as you know, anytime somebody is killed in your state, I mean, you, along its distinguished career in Connecticut, you know that leaves a massive hole in community. And to simply not investigate it, say there's nothing to see here. We've heard from the second most important official at DOJ that they're not going to investigate the Renee Good case, that they are not going to investigate at all. And I would hope that this committee would say, no, we do expect that when Minnesotans or anybody of any state is killed, particularly in connection with the officer-involved matter, that there will be an investigation. And it'll be fair, and it'll be thorough, and it'll be joint. And then whatever the results are what the results are. But the fact that they're not going to investigate, and local officials in large numbers have quit because of the conduct of the recent conduct of the DOJ, this is all deeply disturbing, and I hope we can turn the corner.
I appreciate the measured and insightful tone that you were bringing and the message of hope. You've used that term a number of times. The people of Minnesota deserve hope that things will now change. And I hope that they will. I think the nation hopes that they will. But in the meantime, the failure to investigate the Good killing, and in fact, I believe that the investigation is focused on Renee Good's family.
That's right.
Insofar as there is any investigation, it's of her sister and possibly her family. I find absolutely abhorrent and incomprehensible. So I think there is a need for real reform in the Department of Homeland Security, which we are endeavoring to do, as you know, with common sense, restraints, and far-reaching overhaul of this agency that right now is out of control and needs to be reined in. But in the focus on this action in Minneapolis, I hope professionalism, such as you brought to this effort, will prevail. And again, my thanks to you and Mr. Schnell and Mr. Niska for being here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Moreno.
Thank you. Mr. Niska, I'll start with you. Just a basic question, just to kind of level set. We can have the three of you just answer decently quickly. Do you think that people who are here in this country illegally, meaning they either entered illegally or overstayed a visa, should be deported? Yes, simple yes or no.
The rule of law, yes.
Mr. Ellison?
Do they have an asylum petition pending?
You get your microphone.
If they have a pending asylum petition, I think it should be heard. If they have some basis for their presence in the country, I think ordinary due process should take place.
Yeah, it's just from my perspective, simple. I'm not a big shot lawyer like you. Just a quick question. If you enter the country illegally or you overstay a visa, should you be deported?
My simple answer is, sir, it depends.
Okay, so if somebody breaks into your home, should they be arrested for breaking and entering, or does it depend?
It's an entirely different scenario.
How's that?
Because immigration is essentially a civil, and breaking into my home is a criminal matter.
Oh, okay, gotcha. So if there's laws that should be enforced. So we shouldn't enforce civil violations?
We absolutely should enforce them.
So,
But
but you just said that it's a civil matter, so it's different. So if somebody
you enforce
creates
civil
a ci-
matters.
So if somebody commits a civil infraction, it shouldn't be enforced?
It should be.
Okay, so they should be deported.
No, they should have due process that is associated with their petition. So
Okay,
for example,
so the act of entering the country illegally, you think we should say, well, did you really do it or not do it? It's pretty obvious that they did, right?
well, I mean, it would depend on the facts of the situation. And then they might say,
I just gave you the facts. They
Right, but-
entered the country without permission.
but Senator, what if they had a good faith basis to say they would be persecuted in their home country and subjected to real oppression there under international law? There are provisions for them to make a case.
That's a phenomenal point. Mexico and Canada, do you consider those to be safe countries or no?
Generally, I do, but there are certain
generally you
circumstan-
do? Wow,
Well, I mean, I would just say this.
You border Canada. Don't insult your neighbors to the north.
No, I love my neighbors to the
Okay,
north,
well, so
but I
is
will-
it a generally safe country?
generally, yes.
So then
But-
somebody seeking asylum could certainly be safe in Canada and Mexico, no?
Now, so like if somebody, we do know that in Mexico, which is another country I truly admire and think is a wonderful country, but there have been cases of persecution, people who have legitimate
So people
fear.
aren't safe in Mexico? Refugees cannot be safe in Mexico?
Some might not be. And I think, and
So
what I'm
maybe,
saying,
maybe
Senator,
we shouldn't have a free trade agreement with them then.
I didn't say that, but what I would say, Senator, is that we should hear their petition. We
Gotcha.
should at least hear it out. We should say, is there a well-founded and legitimate fear of persecution in your home
That
country?
can't happen in Mexico?
Well, I think that she should just follow the international protocols that existed. And
It is, which is that you seek asylum in your nearest country that you are seeking asylum in. But it sounds to me that your answer is no. Mr. Snell?
Senator, if I were to answer yes or no, it would be misleading. And I think ultimately it does boil down to due process.
It actually is pretty staggering that the easiest question that I could possibly ask is confusing for the two of you. I mean, that's decently disgusting. And I'm going to tell you why from my perspective. I wasn't born in this country. My mom and dad had to follow the rules to bring me and my 6 siblings into the United States. And I find it disgusting that the two of you guys want to reward people who skip the line, pay drug cartel members to smuggle them across the border, are coached to say exactly the right words when they hit Border Patrol. And by the way, the people who do that, the people who are from my neck of the woods, from South and Latin America, get abused, get raped, get held at gunpoint because people like you say, oh, it's okay, maybe we'll allow them into the country, when we should have a very simple policy, which is you can't enter our country illegally and you can't overstay your visa. The fact that the two of you are top law enforcement people in your state and you can't simply say, hey, violating a civil or criminal offense is a problem, is probably the origin of why we have these issues. Let's move on for something else. Mr. Ellison, as the Attorney General of the state of Ohio, I'm sorry, the state of Minnesota, you would never get elected in Ohio. Who's Victoria Harwell? Because you haven't said her name. I'm just curious who she is.
is there a question you'd like to ask me?
Yeah, who is she?
As I understand it, she's a very unfortunate, tragic victim of a crime.
Okay, and what have you done about it?
Well, in Minnesota, sir, I prosecute crimes that are.
What have you done for Victoria?
I'm
Harwell?
telling you about my jurisdiction.
I'm just telling you what you've done for
No,
Victoria
I'm
Harwell.
telling you about my
No,
jurisdiction.
but I didn't ask you a question about your jurisdiction.
But it
If I
has
did,
to-
you could answer that one, but I haven't. So just tell me about Victoria Harwell. Just tell me what maybe the answer is nothing, which is fine. Just tell me what you've done for Victoria Harwell.
We have done everything that the law allows us to do.
Okay. And she's an American citizen, right?
I assume so, yes.
You haven't even bothered to look into who she is?
No, sir. What I'm telling you is that I don't know, what her nationality is. It doesn't mean I don't know anything. It means I don't know that.
Well, thank you for your concern for the Harwell family. It's obviously pretty sad that the Attorney General of the state of Minnesota has not even bothered to understand who she is. You haven't mentioned her testimony, but you certainly know who Renee Good and Alex Preddy are.
I do.
Yeah, so obviously your priorities are clearly obvious. Tell me about Temple Israel. What happened there?
Well, my dear friend of mine is the
That would be
rabbi,
the answer to
lead
your question
rabbi at Temple Israel.
Could you just answer my question, please?
Well, a lot of things happen there. Do you have something in mind you'd like to bring up?
Yeah, any particular incidents happen of
Well,
anti-Semitism?
there have been acts of anti-Semitism there.
What have you done about it?
Of which I oppose vigorously. We've supported local law enforcement in doing the right thing in those communities. I mean, let me tell you, you're asking me about a place I know a lot about. I've been to Temple Israel an untold number of times. And so if they ever have any security concerns, that is a concern of mine.
And
absolutely.
So what have you actually done differently to help fight anti-Semitism in Minnesota?
I speak against anti-Semitism. I condemn it as repugnant and wrong.
Let's pause there. You speak against anti-Semitism. Will you condemn Louis Farrakhan's comments saying that Judaism is a dirty religion?
You know, sir, I thought I was coming here to talk about immigration
that was
policy.
a layup question, by the way.
No, I thought I was talking about immigration policy. I didn't know that we were going to be talking about all these matters. I mean, I'm reluctant to just sort of, we already had one thing where we didn't mention immigration policy at all. I'm fine with you asking about questions around asylum and things like that. That makes a lot of sense to me. But now we're going off in all kind of different directions. I think there should be some scope to this hearing. And so, thank you for your interest, and we both share a need to condemn anti-Semitism.
A few of my colleagues have gone over time, Mr. Chairman. So I find it disgusting that we would have a witness who's the Attorney General of a state that will not condemn the fact that somebody said that Judaism is a dirty religion. The fact that we have a witness of that low caliber here before the United States Congress is an insult to this institution.
I'd like to put a finer point on one of the things you asked too, because the responses were that they say, well, due process hadn't been completed. Let's say due process is completed. There is a final order, but the person isn't accused of any crime. Their only crime is being in the country illegally, as Senator Moreno did. Mr. Schnell, would you advise the Minneapolis police to assist in a final order? Their only crime is that they're in the country illegally.
Senator, if there is a judicial order, absolutely, we should comply.
Attorney General Ellison.
Certainly.
Okay, see, I think that's unclear. Not maybe from Mr. Schnell's point of view, but I think from the edicts and things coming down, I don't think it is clear. People have the feeling that you don't want any cooperation with ICE on someone who's here in the country illegally. So I think as we look at this, if we're Democrats and we only say, oh, it's ICE, 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 and we don't say, well, that the cooperation had anything to do with it, and I'm not saying it justifies any kind of bad behavior, but I really haven't gotten the feeling, and I know it's been contentious, but I haven't gotten the feeling that you're willing to accept some responsibility for the lack of cooperation escalating this problem.
Can I respond, Senator? Before Operation Metro Surge, ICE was operating, legally and in a cooperative way in the state of Minnesota. People may not like the way they were operating, but they were operating legally and with cooperation. It is this dramatic escalation that has caused so much problem. And so you're recommending that I try to be more clear. I will certainly take that to heart, sir. But this surge is, in fact, a very serious issue.
And it's not without criticism. I'm just saying that there is the sense in the country and in Minnesota that you wouldn't want, that you're so opposed to deporting someone just for deporting them, that you don't want anybody to enforce it, that you don't want the police to be involved with this. And so I think it is necessary, if you do believe the police should cooperate, to say publicly the police of Minneapolis will cooperate. And it's going to be the way we're going to get to less ICE here by having 10 police officers go with one ICE agent to arrest people, but that you're for that. And I can't tell you what to say. I'm just saying I want less tensions. I don't want more people to be, unjustifiably injured or killed. So it's a thought. And I'm sorry I interrupted, Senator Ernst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to all of our witnesses for being here today to testify on government oversight. So while I won't be focusing on ICE and all of those issues, those are significant issues. I do focus on a lot of issues that come down to fraud within the federal government. So again, want to thank you all for being here. Really appreciate your time. So I'll set the stage. We have a lot of families like mine that live in Iowa, Minnesota. I come from a blue-collar working family, a farm family. My parents farmed, they worked very hard. Their parents ahead of them worked very hard to get where we are today. I'm very privileged to sit in this seat today. My sister works for a trucking company. She and her husband farm. My brother is a blue-collar labor union worker for the railroad. Every one of their tax dollars needs to be protected because they work darn hard in all types of weather. They work outside. They don't have the privilege of sitting in a cushy office working 9 to 5. But what we have found in the federal government through years and years of the work that I have done on oversight is that 1 out of every $10 that Americans send to the federal government is squandered away and lost in fraud. 1 out of every $10. So there's no time to waste in giving Americans peace of mind about how we use their hard-earned dollars. We have seen examples like the Quality Leering Center in Minnesota recently, but this is happening in every single state. It's not just Minnesota, it is every single state. And accordingly, Mr. Chairman, I would like to submit my Squeal Award to Minnesota Governor Walz for the state's massive fraud ring for the record. I'm putting
Without
together
objection.
thank you. I'm putting together a package of pragmatic, bipartisan proposals because I have friends on the other side of the aisle that see this as a massive scam against the American public. They see this and they want to deal with it. They want to prevent waste from ever occurring again. For too long, Congress has pretended to search for who is actually responsible for the amount of fraud and waste in programs after those funds have already gone out to the states and localities. It's almost like a problem Scooby-Doo and the Mystery Gang might face. So right here, folks, well, the mystery is solved. Congress is responsible. By allowing weak incentives for states and localities to police spending after those grant funds are dispersed, fraud is able to increase more easily, and it's harder to recoup improperly used taxpayer you.